morning, everyone. My name is Mario Serrato. I'm the area manager with Loan Depot, and today we're going to be discussing two topics. One of them is condos and what an agent should know. Condos is one of those transactions that if you don't know what you're doing, you find out at the last minute after the loan commitment period or after the appraisal is ordered that the condo is not financeable. That's probably one of the biggest pitfalls that condo financing has. And an untrained loan officer could really screw up your transaction and maybe even put your earnest money deposit in jeopardy. But part of the problem is that some agents don't really understand what it means for condo financing, and especially listing agents. I find that listing agents don't really do any homework when they take the listing on a condo. And it really is important that if you're going to list a condo, you really have to understand whether it's financeable or not, because that makes a difference between a cash offer, a 25% down payment buyer, and a 3% down payment buyer. So if the building's approved, you'll be able to go all the way to 97% financing. Your buyer only has to do 3% down payment. But that's a mouthful if your building is approved, right? And there's a bunch of reasons why a building won't be approved. And sometimes the building was approved and it's not approved anymore. And then you also have to understand your buyer. Is your buyer an FHA buyer or a conventional buyer? So we're going to dig into those things. And then I'm going to end with a list that's approved for Florida, a Florida condo approved list that I'll email to you guys or whoever wants it. And that list is just a reference point of buildings that have been approved recently and that their approvals haven't expired. But because we're in 2024 now, you'll have to ask for updated budgets just to confirm that the approval still stands. So we're going to dig into that. So as the title says, condominiums, what agents should look for. All right, so if you're looking at these pictures, which one do you think is a condominium? The building on the left? Okay. Oh, there you go. That's the right answer. It could be all of them.
All of them.
Right. And the reason that is because construction zoning laws and yada, yada stuff that's above my pay grade. You know, when these developers start making these projects, it apparently is more favorable to go as a condo zoning than it is as a lot and block on a villa or a townhouse. So oftentimes agents see this and they'll list it as a townhouse or a villa. But if you look at the legal description, it says condo, and that is the #1 guide. If the word condo is in the legal description, I don't care what it looks like, it's a condo. And it has to be treated like a condo. And it has to be, the financing gets affected, the budget is involved, and there's so much involved when it becomes a condo. So don't let the facade of the property fool you, and especially if you're on the MLS, do not let what the listing agent says fool you. They don't know. Oftentimes they just put whatever it looks like. Oh, it's a townhome. What do you mean it's a condo? It looks just like a town. It even has a one-car garage. That means nothing. It could be a condo. Now, obviously, if it's a building, it's definitely going to be a condo. But if it's one of these three on the right-hand side, it could be a condo. It could be a villa. It could be a townhouse. So it's important for you to understand that distinction, that you cannot go by the way it looks. You have to go by the way the legal description shows.
In the MLS is right.
The MLS is never right. That's what I'm telling you.
No, I'm sorry. And sometimes in the MLS it describes what is it.
Yeah, but
The MLS has a legal description.
whatever you
Yeah,
put
so-
on it is what.
So
But yes,
yeah, so
yeah.
I would tell you, like, let's say just off subject a little bit, if you had an FHA buyer, so condos have to be FHA approved, and in Florida, there's probably 10 or 15 that are approved in the whole state. So it's really hard to get a condo, an FHA buyer to buy a condo, because you'd have to do a spot approval. Spot approvals are very difficult. They're called single unit approvals in Florida. And so if you have an FHA buyer, the first thing I tell the buyer's agent is say, hey, when you're looking for properties, put in a criteria on the MLS or Matrix. I think you guys use Matrix now, and put legal description does not contain the word condo. This way, any listing that you show is definitely, you're going to be in good hands. You're not going to have to worry that it's a condo. So the legal description, the point of that little anecdotal story is that the legal description is the one that rules. The legal description is the one that's going to tell you if it's a condo or not. There is some counties that have a little bit of a cheat code, if you will. Broward is the only one I can think of right now. I think St. Lucie also, but Broward County, if the folio ID has a letter in it, it's a condo. It's not the same for Dade, but for Broward County, if the folio ID has a letter in it, it's a condo.
Si el cliente no lo pone, si el listing agent no lo pone el MLS,
¿Qué no va a poner?
la descripción.
No, ellos no tienen opción, es parte,
Tiene que poner.
se tiene que poner. Ellos no escogen eso, eso se pone. O sea, el sistema pone el legal description. So the question is, can the listing agent opt not to put the legal description? Eddie, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that's an option that they have. The legal description is a default field that they cannot remove.
Yeah. So the way that I've always worked this, Mario, or basically from my perspective, is that when I'm looking at a legal, if there's a lot and block, it's not a condo. If there's no lot and block, it's a condo. No matter whatever else is in the legal, if you don't have a lot and block, you're not. It's a condo. That's it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think that's another way of looking at it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bueno,
So yes, and it is not an option. You have to fill in the legal in the MLS.
Right. And impose it. It doesn't let you type it in, right?
It does let you type it in, but it also imposes it. Again, whenever you're going to show in a community, you should do your own research, especially if you've got parameters that don't allow the buyer to buy a condo. You got to make sure you're not going to show them a condo, because that's the one they're going to fall in love with, you know? So it's really what happens.
All right. So why are condominiums a riskier transaction, right? There's a bunch of reasons. One bad apple can affect the entire building. There could be a slip and fall. There could be litigation that happens that screws it up for everybody. So the way Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac look at it is really not about the building as much as the association. That used to be the case. Now it's the association and the building. Ever since we had that tragedy in Champaign Towers in Surfside, where those buildings came down, all the agencies have imposed a ton of rules now having to do with the safety and the structural integrity of the building. That didn't used to be the case. It used to be just the association. Did we have the finances in place? Does the HOA get all its dues that it expects? In other words, are the owners paying their association fees? Because if they're not paying their association fees, the association can't keep up with the common areas, can't keep up with the security, can't keep up with the repairs. So that's important, right?
And you'll lose the property.
Yeah. Another thing to consider is the share of investment properties. So how many people are investors? Now, if you're buying a primary residence, that's not a big deal anymore. But if you're buying an investment property, yes, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac do care about how many investors are in that building. They don't want to approve a loan that has 100% investors. I think 50% is the mark that they'll allow you to go to. Only if your buyer is an investment buyer. If your buyer is a primary owner occupied buyer, the occupancy does not matter. So they also have loan level pricing adjusters. And so what does that mean? That means that your rate is, let's say, 6.5%, but because you're buying a condo, your rate might cost some money to get that 6.5%, or the rate might be a little bit higher. Because condominiums historically have been riskier transactions, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac put what they call loan level pricing adjusters, because risk and interest rate have a direct relationship, right? The higher the risk, the higher the interest rate. And so because of all that, that's what makes condominiums a riskier transaction. If you had a choice between having to buy a condo or having to buy a legitimate townhouse, you should go townhouse all the way, because it removes a whole layer of requirements. You don't have to ask for the budget. You don't have to worry about the association. Are they paying on time? You don't have to worry about litigation or anything like that. So condominiums do represent a riskier transaction. But that being said, we're in Florida. We have a lot of condos. So we can't shy away from it. We got to figure out a way of making it work. And so that's why you guys are all here. Despite the risk, condo financing happens every day. I would say 25–30% of our transactions are condos, right? Buyers can buy, that's wrong. They can buy up to 97% of the sales price if the association is in a healthy state or adheres to the agency guidelines. We'll talk about what that is. So the lenders require that the associate complete a questionnaire to determine if it's approvable for 97% financing. So there's about 30+ questions in a typical condo questionnaire. So here are the typical killers. This is usually what kills an association. Association is not collecting 10% in reserves every month. And I'm going to talk about that because this is probably the most confusing thing there is. So we'll have a listing agent call me and say, hey, we have an offer and you're telling me that the buyer doesn't qualify because they don't have 25%. But if you look at the account, the association has $1 million in reserves. But that's not the rule. The rule is not how much you have in reserves. The rule is, are you collecting 10% every month? That's what the rule is. So if you're collecting $1 million in association fees, $100,000 of that $1 million has to be put away for reserves. And that is the rule. Not how much you have in reserves, how much are you collecting currently on the adopted approved budget. So that's another, I would say, myth, is that because the association has a lot of money in reserves, they don't have to be collecting anymore. That's incorrect. And oftentimes when the associations meet to decide what the budget's going to be, everybody wants to vote to decrease the HOA payment. That's, you're an owner, you want less of a payment, right? And what's the first thing they do? Eliminate the reserves. But what they don't know is by eliminating the reserves, they're affecting their resale value. Why? Because the only people that can buy there are people with cash or 25% down payment. And when you have a condo that's listed for $300,000 or $400,000, those people do not have 25% down payment for the most part. They're usually first-time home buyers, and first-time home buyers typically do not have a 25% down payment. So that's a mistake that if you're part of a board, you should raise your hand and say, hey, we're not collecting enough reserves. We should be doing this in order to increase our resale value, because you're going to find a lot more buyers at 3% down payment than at 25% down payment, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's just logical. Another one is litigation. So not all litigation is bad, but if you have litigation, we have to dig in. So as an example, a litigation could be as simple as the association evicting a renter on a property that the association owns for XYZ reason. That's considered litigation, but that's not a big deal. That's okay. But here's one that's not okay. Somebody fell and cracked their head on the pool and they're suing the association for $1 million. Probably nobody's going to get financing there. Another example is that an owner is suing because of mold and they got sick and they have, $500,000 in hospital bills, or somebody died or has a respiratory disease because of the mold. That would be an example of something that you wouldn't be able to get financing for. So sometimes if the buildings, you have a condominium with 5 different detached buildings, if the lawsuit is particular to one unit, then you should be okay. So those are the kinds of things that we have to evaluate when we're looking at a condo, when it has to do with litigation. Another one is short-term rentals. So for example, if you're buying in a building that allows Airbnb 2-week rentals, they're not going to allow that. If you have a rental desk in the lobby, Fannie Mae is not going to allow that. So Fannie Mae requires that you have, I think they changed it from 12-month to 6-month lease minimum in order for you to not be considered a short-term rental. More than 15% of the unit owners are more than 60 days late. So if you have 15% of the population of the owners that are 60 days late or more, you're not going to get financing on that either. So you see, there's a lot of rules that listing agents don't even think about when they're listing these condos. And buyers agents, they're just putting them under contract without really understanding this information. Now, I'll tell you that out of all of these, the first 2 are the #1 killers, right? The reserves and the litigation are things that you can know up front. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, you can call the listing agent and say, hey, give me the budget. If you're going to list a condo, it would be very wise of you to ask for the owner to request a budget. It's free for them. The association is not going to say no to them because they're owners. And you should put that under, I don't know if they call it in the MLS, other attachments or additional attachments or something like that. But you should post on there the current approved budget. Now we're in 2024, so there's new budgets that were decided in December for every association right now.
Hey, Mario.
Yeah.
One of the other things they should get to are the rules and bylaws and also the condo docs, because those are all documents that have to be handed over to a buyer within a 10-day period. So as a listing agent, hopefully they get themselves ready ahead of time and they have all those documents already. So that's imperative that they get those ahead of time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. So there's 2 types of approvals when it comes to financing a condo. There's one called a full review which, as it implies, is going to be a complete analysis of the budget, the insurance, and the condo questionnaire. The condo questionnaire has about 30 questions. It's going to ask structural integrity questions. Has the building ever been shut down or evacuated? Is there a current pending? Is there a special assessment? What is the special assessment for? Has anybody been late on their association? How many people? How many investors? It's going to ask a ton of questions to determine if the building is approvable by Fannie Mae. So a lot of times this has already been done and Fannie Mae has already approved it. And that's the list that I'm going to give you guys. But there's so many condos, it's impossible for Fannie Mae to have reviewed all of them. So we have to do this review. Now, the full review is going to require the budget questions. Probably the only thing that's different between the full review and the limited review. We'll talk about the limited review in a second. So if you can pass a full review on your condo questionnaire, then you can do as little as 3% financing if you're a first-time home buyer. If you're not a first-time home buyer, you have to do at least 5%. Now, that has nothing to do with what the rules are for the association. So if the association has their own rule, they say anybody that wants to buy in our association has to put at least 10% down. That has nothing to do with the lender. That has to do with them. And so the borrower cannot do less than the 10% because that's what the association rule is. And that's separate and apart from the lending requirement. So if you're able to pass a full condo questionnaire, you could do as little as 3% down. Now, let's talk about condo questionnaires. So condo questionnaires cannot really be asked for ahead of time. And the reason that is because, like everything else in Florida, it's a racket. And they charge $300, $400, $500 to do a condo questionnaire. So if you do your loan with loanDepot, we will pay for that condo questionnaire ahead of time as soon as the borrower signs its disclosures and pays for the appraisal. So we'll go ahead and pay for it ourselves and cross our fingers that the loan's going to close. If the loan doesn't close, it's a cost of doing business for us, and we simply eat that cost. But if it does close, and we charge it back to the borrower on the closing disclosure. And the reason I bring that up is if you're dealing with a broker or something like that, they're not going to do that. They're going to require the buyer to pay for it up front. So a point of distinction there. Then you have a limited review. So what does a limited review mean? A limited review is we're going to ask a limited amount of questions, probably 10 less questions than we would ask on a full questionnaire. But the biggest one on a limited review that matters is the 10% reserves. A limited review does not require 10% reserves. So if you have a building that is collecting 6%, 5%, or no reserves, you can still do the financing, but your borrower will have to do 25% down payment for a primary residence or 30% down payment if it's a second home or investment property. If you're able to swing that down payment, you can buy there without having the reserve requirement. You still have to meet the other requirements, which is, you know, how many people are late? Is there any litigation? Is there any structural issues? And so you still have to meet that. Now, there is a little trick around the 25%. You can do it with as little as 10% down because you're allowed to go to 75% loan to value or 90% combined loan to value. So you would get a 75% first mortgage and a 15% second mortgage in the form of a line of credit. And then you can buy with 10% down plus closing costs. So that's a little more palatable than 25% down for someone. The issue with that is you have to have good credit, because if you don't have good credit, you're not going to get an approval for that line of credit. And your debt to income ratio has to be lower than if you were to just get one mortgage. And why is that? That's because when you're getting a line of credit, the requirements to get a line of credit are a lot harder than the requirements are for a first mortgage. And so when you have a borrower that wants to buy a property that doesn't have reserves, but does have the 10%, but their credit score is 640, they're not buying that property. They don't have good enough credit.
The line of credit, how much is gonna be the interest?
Depends on the credit score. But it's going to
be the same?
No. The line of credit is a separate loan with a separate bank. We manage both of the transactions. All lines of credits are based on prime. Prime is an index in the market. It's currently 8.25, 8.5, something like that. And so the interest rate is usually prime plus a margin, and that margin is fixed. So it could be prime plus 1, or prime plus 2, or prime plus 1/4. It just depends on the credit score. So you would combine the first mortgage at 75%, and the second mortgage is a line of credit at 15%, and now you have 90, and the borrower comes in with 10% plus closing costs. So we've done plenty of those. Those are still very doable if the borrower has good credit and the debt to income ratio is on point. But still, nothing beats a full review and a full approval with 3% down. So another thing to look out for when you're buying a property, when you are, you're representing the buyer, if there's a special assessment. If there's a special assessment and let's say it's a Fannie Mae approved property and we have an approval already, but then the contract comes in with a special assessment, that approval is out the window because now there's a special assessment. Something happened. And so we're going to ask, hey, what is the special assessment for? And let's say the association comes back and says, we're going to remodel the elevators. That's fine. You're good to go. But if the special assessment comes back and says, we found a crack on one of the columns, deal's dead. Or
redo the roof or something.
Redo the roof, could be iffy. More than likely, they're going to ask for the minutes of the last meeting to confirm that it's legitimate, because in the minutes, it'll say what the special assessment's about. So special assessments is a red flag for you to ask more questions, right? And why do we want to do this? We don't want to make life more difficult, but we also don't want you to be surprised 25 days into the transaction. And I call you, as I'm the loan officer, and I call you and say, hey, I know it's been 25 days, but guess what? We can't do the transaction now. How are you going to feel? You're going to be mad at me, for sure. You're going to be mad. You're not going to get your commission. And then the borrower's earnest money deposit could be in jeopardy. It's just a big mess. So we like, when we have a condo, we want the condo questionnaire immediately. We want the budget immediately. We want everything to happen fast. And a lot of times the agents and the buyers don't understand that sense of urgency. And so they'll drag their feet, or they'll not sign the documents, or the buyer's agent won't get in contact with us or won't give us the HOA information, and they don't understand that they're hurting themselves. So keep that in mind when you're buying a condo. I'm not trying to strike the fear of God in you when you have a condo transaction, but I do want you to understand that it is urgent that you are on top of the association and helping the lender get the documents that we need to get this transaction done. For the most part, we do everything, but every now and then we'll get stuck and we'll need the listing agent to get involved or you to get involved just to make sure that we facilitate the transaction. Or as an example, I had one that the borrower sat on signing the intent to proceed for 5-7 days. We couldn't order the condo questionnaire until 5-7 days until he signed it. And then once he signed it, the association says, well, $300 and you get it in 7 to 10 days, or you could pay a rush fee for $600 and get it in 3 days. Loan commitment was in 10 days. He had to pay the rush fee. And so he's mad that he had to pay a rush fee. And I have a bunch of emails saying, hey, you haven't signed. Hey, you haven't signed. Can't order the condo questionnaire. I have emails to the buyer's agent. Hey, your buyer has not signed. I cannot order the questionnaire. So I'm covered, right? You can only do so much. That's what I want you guys to understand, the urgency when you have a condo, that when we ask for the condo questionnaire, when we ask for docs, we need to get them ASAP. It's for your own good. It's for the borrower's own good. We want to protect that loan commitment period. That loan commitment period now is really hard because it includes the appraisal, right? And if you think about it, if you're a buyer and I tell you to pay for the appraisal and we don't even know if the condo questionnaire is going to be good, that's a tough pill to swallow, right? Yeah. I got some skin in the game. I'm paying for the condo questionnaire, and now the buyer has some skin in the game because they're paying for the appraisal. So what I like to do is try to get the budget ahead of time before even going under contract. And so I know that the biggest hurdle, the 10%, is out of the way. And then the other thing is I'll tell the agent, hey, you should call and find out if there's any litigation. Tell the listing agent to have the owner find out if there's any litigation. If the answer is no, you got two of the main things out of the way. The rest is probably going to be easy. And then you're safe to pay for the appraisal. But if the answer is, yeah, there is litigation, we need to dig in a little bit before we order the appraisal and spend $550 of the borrower's money. So these are important things that you're going to add value to your buyer by knowing these things ahead of time. And it got cold in here. Let me put my sweater on. So it's important to understand that when you're buying a condo, there's a little more level of scrutiny, a little extra work that's going to be required on your behalf in order to make sure that you give the buyer a good experience and that we don't spend unnecessary money from your buyer and you're respecting the loan commitment period. So oftentimes, if we don't have the appraisal back, we might say something like, hey, you might want to extend the loan commitment period. So important things to understand.
Mario?
Yes.
I just wanted to say that everything you've said is to point. I appreciate what you're saying. And it's totally needed that the agent that's selling the condo be very, very diligent in grabbing and getting everything that's needed to get an approval. But everything you're saying is right to point, and I really appreciate the way you're covering that.
Oh, thank you, thank you. You know, oftentimes when we call the listing agent, they'll say, I don't understand what the problem is. We've had plenty of people buy here with conventional loans. I say, you know what's the first thing I say? Give me the address. And then I pull the address and it was a cash transaction. Or I'll pull the address and it was a foreign national loan. And so it's all BS because it's very easy to say, oh, we've closed here before. Yeah, prove it. They can't prove it because it's, you know, these are not Loan Depot rules. These are rules that the government has pushed upon us. You know, we're not making this up. We're in the business of closing loans. We're 100% commission. We definitely don't want to sabotage a transaction. All we want to do is close, just like you guys, right? So understand where the message is coming from, understand where the request is coming from. And I tell this to listing agents all the time. I'm like, do you understand that I get paid? I only get paid if I close this transaction. I promise you, I'm not trying to sabotage the deal. I'm just trying to make it work. So don't give me a hard time. Help me here, right? Okay, so you guys now understand that there's a limited review. So if you have a buyer that fell in love with the condo, but they don't have the reserves, you have the option of doing 10% down. If the borrower has it, they can get it as a gift. We can move forward with the transaction. Okay, so there is a new FHA condo process, and here, let me just explain to you what this is all about. So when you have somebody that has to go FHA, and there's a variety of reasons why you have to go FHA. More than likely it's credit score, but it also could be waiting period. So for example, they had a bankruptcy and it's only, 2 years old and you can only go FHA, or it's only 3 years old and you can only go FHA because conventional requires 4 years. Or it could be the debt to income ratio is 52% and the maximum debt to income ratio on conventional is 50%. So there's a variety of reasons why a borrower has to go FHA. Another big one is the credit score. Let's say the credit score is 665. Well, the mortgage insurance on a 665 credit score in conventional is going to kill you. It's going to be triple what it is on FHA. FHA is only 0.55, no matter what your score is, right? As an MI factor. And what that translates to is $55 for every $100,000. So these are things that, these are reasons why people have to go FHA. Well, here's where the problem comes in. You have a first-time home buyer, they make $25 an hour, and they have their price point is $280. Where are you going to buy a house at $280 in Miami or in Broward or in Palm Beach? You got to go to Northern Florida to get that house, right? And so they have to go condo, but their score is not good enough. So there's two routes you can take. You can try to get that score up, or you can try to find a condo that's FHA approvable. Now that's very hard to do. Where there is a website that we can go to that tells us if a condo is FHA approved. But you're going to see, because I'll send you guys a link, that you're going to look for 30 condos and you're not going to find one that's FHA approved. And then if you find one that is FHA approved, you're going to find no listings because the minute it's listed, people know about it and they'll snag it up. Very difficult. Now there is this thing called a single unit approval. And they came out with this, I want to say 3 years ago, October, 3 years ago. I remember it was in October because it was all over social media and everybody thought, oh my God, we can now condo FHA. Nope. Because of the requirements on everything that they asked for, very few condominiums meet the requirement. So it was all for naught, just like everything else. Something comes out new, listing agents and buyers agents, they call and say, oh, my guy could do it. Oh, that guy doesn't know what he's doing. Oh, no, it's not true. It's the same process for everybody. Now, there is a way of telling whether you can do it because you can actually go to the FHA website. And if you know how to read the fields, there's a concentration field. And if that concentration is above 0.03 or 0.04, something like that, that tells you that somebody tried to do a single unit and was successful. So that's one way of doing it. But again, it's very difficult. It's not easy. But the process does exist, and we have done them. We have probably closed in 3 years. We may have closed 2 or 3 units FHA single unit approvals, and we probably tried 20. You know,
I've tried 5 myself,
you tried 5 and none of them went through. Yeah.
and it's a pain.
Oh, let me get mine.
And it's a pain for them to get back to you.
Yeah.
3 weeks, 4 weeks.
Yeah. Sorry about that, guys. Let me plug in here.
Didn't realize that.
Rookie mistake here. Power. Okay, so yeah, that's what we talk about for the, I mean, I'm not gonna go down the list of the requirements for a single unit approval, because why? You guys are not gonna remember it, it's not relevant right now. And if you ever have one, we'd have to just evaluate it ourselves, basically. So you're a listing agent, what do? Right? You ask for the budget, right? You want to help yourself. First of all, you want to sell it at maximum price, right? You want to eliminate offers that don't make any sense. So if you know that the property does not have reserves, what should you do? In the broker remarks, hey, if your buyer has good credit, you can buy this property with 10% down. Please do not submit an offer at 3% down or 5% down. It won't work. There are the reserves are not meeting the minimum requirement. So you can help yourself by eliminating those offers, right? You could also get maximum price because you know that ahead of time. You could put the budget there, so when you have a very nosy loan officer like myself that don't believe listing agents, that don't think that they know how to read budgets, and this has happened, they'll tell us, no, you can't do maximum financing. I say, okay, let me have the budget. I'm just telling you can't, Mr. Mario. Okay, can you please give me the budget? Because there are tricks around the budget. And guess what? A lot of times we can do it. They're collecting 8.6%. I'll let you in on the secrets, right? But the association covers the water bill for the owners. And let's say that's $200,000 a year. I can subtract that $200,000 from the association fee. So my 10% is no longer based on a higher number. My 10% is based on a lower number. They include the lawn mowing. Well, we can remove that. We can deduct that. So any alarm servicing, cable servicing, any of those owner services can be deducted from the top line. So mathematically, your 10% is lower. Here's another trick. The association is part of a master association. I can combine the reserves from that master association with my association and take all the appropriate deductions, and I might meet the 10%. It has happened more than once where the listing agent thinks that we don't meet the 10% reserves, and voila, we do. It just takes an expert eye to understand it. So understand that. Like if you have a listing and it's a condo, I mean, go to your loan officer and have them evaluate the budget if they know what they're doing. If you don't think they know what they're doing, you can send it to me. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But yeah, so that's important, right? Understand what you're selling, understand how to get the maximum sales price, and also ask, is there a special assessment? And if there is, you should find out what it's for. Because whether you want to or not, eventually you will be facing that problem when you have that buyer. And it's better that you don't tell your seller that, hey, listen, we've been under contract for 20 days, but the bar didn't qualify because the condo didn't have this or didn't have that. If I was a seller, the first thing I would ask is, well, why didn't you know that? You know, I'm paying you to be an expert, right? You're supposed to know that. So make sure you understand that. If you have a buyer, make sure you understand that your buyer whether they're an FHA buyer or a conventional buyer, ask the appropriate questions. Like if you get a pre-approval for FHA and your buyer is asking for a condo, hey, this is an FHA loan. Hey, Mr. Loan Officer, you submitted an FHA pre-approval, but he has to buy a condo. What's going on? Oh, well, he has to go FHA. So just any condo will do. No, you know better now. You know that FHA and condos, they don't mix too well. So you now understand that. So understanding your buyer, understanding the transaction will, I mean, and honestly, these things that I'm talking about are pretty simple things, right? They're not a big deal to understand, but understanding it is important in order for you not to look bad on the transaction. You're considered a trusted advisor, so they're expecting you to know what you're doing. We covered what the buyer's agents should know. You know, there's a plan B, right? If you know your buyer has 10% down or has the ability to getting 10% down, you can pretty safely look for condos, even if they don't have the reserves, right? We talked about if you have an FHA buyer and you want to avoid those villas that look like, you know, those condos that look like villas or look like townhouses, go with the legal description, make sure it doesn't have the word condo, or as Eddie said, make sure that it has the word lot and block. Or if you're buying in Broward, a little quick trick is the folio ID. If the folio ID has a letter, it's a condo. Those are a couple of things that you can do to help yourself. And what do we do? If you have a budget, we can look for it ahead of time. If you have an address, you can send it to Jose or myself or whoever, whatever other loan officer you're working with, and we can run it by the Fannie Mae website to see if it's already approved. If it's not on the Fannie Mae website, we can also look on our database. It could be that last month we closed a loan in that project and it's already approved and you don't have to do anything. That's nice, right? So that's something that you can evaluate. We'll look at budgets, we'll evaluate for Plan B, and we'll prepare the buyer appropriately, and we'll make sure that we get the condo questionnaire quickly once you're under contract. That concludes the condo version of our transaction. Now, what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to stop sharing because I want to share the condo list, because you're going to get the condo list, but I want you to know how to use it. So 1 second. Share my screen once it opens up. All right.
Eso. José, me recuerda.
Okay. Honey, can you confirm that you're okay? Yeah, I can see you guys are seeing my Excel sheet, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, we can see it now.
All right. So first of all, just so you know, there are 3,530 approved condos in Florida. These are 3,530 condos that Fannie Mae has evaluated and has said, yes, good to go, Florida. But remember, we're in 2024 now, so the new budget, the new approved list hasn't come out. It probably doesn't come out till next quarter. But more than likely, if they're on this list, they're going to be approved. We will probably ask for an updated budget to make sure that they still are collecting the 10% reserve. But what I would do if I were you guys, I have this formatted in such a way with a filter that all you have to do is come over here and then type in your project name, a certain part of your project name. So for example, courtyard, right? It'll show you all the courtyards. You click OK. And here are all the courtyards. It gives you the address to see if it's more or less where you're looking at. Let me minimize this. I can see this. Right? And this will tell you, because sometimes these names are very similar. So you got to make sure that you are looking at the right courtyards. And it has the address and the city. And it tells you approved, and it tells you when it expires. So this one expires February of 2025. So this one expired October 2025. So this list is nice. It'll save you a phone call, right? You can just take a look at the list and find out if your property is approved. So let's do another one. Let's just type in Flamingo. I don't know, I'm guessing. There's one Flamingo Fairway. Look at that. If I was looking for properties, if I had a borrower that wanted to buy in a particular city, a condo, maybe smart thing to do is to be filtered by city. So let's say you had a borrower that wanted to buy in Miami's too big.
Naples.
Okay, Naples. Let's do Naples. Naples has a lot of projects. So there you go. Look at that. How many Naples we have? We have 360 projects in Naples that are approved. So how would this help you? You would have to probably look when you're looking at listings, you can see what the name of the project is and cross-reference it with this Excel sheet. And this will give you a very good idea of whether the project has been approved. And if it's not on this list, send your loan officer the address and say, hey, can you tell me if you guys have ever approved a unit in this project? And it could be that it's not on the Fannie Mae list, but it's, we have approved it last month. So that's how you use the condo list. I'm happy to send it to you guys and show you guys if you guys want to have any questions about it or anything like that. That's fine also.
Mario, if you could send that into Honey and she'll send it out to all the agents courtesy of Loan Depot, so that they have it.
Yeah, no problem. ¿Cuál fue la pregunta?
¿Cómo lo buscas por nombre?
Aquí en la primera columna A.
Ah.
Aquí está todo. Pero ahorita tenemos un filtro con ciudad. So tú tienes que quitar este filtro. So if you have a filter, you got to clear the filter first. And otherwise, you're only going to see Naples.
Yeah.
Right? So you would come over here and you would type in under search the name you're looking for. Or you could do it the old-fashioned way. Just scroll down.
Yeah.
I do it through zip codes.
You do it through zip codes?
Es más fácil.
Yeah.
Because, ¿me entiendes? Si busca un zip code en Miami, por ejemplo, 33 empieza con 33, entonces solo busca el zip code y a veces hay cierto...
What's the zip code here?
33175, I believe.
Yeah.
33175. Okay, let's see what we got here. So look, we got these
Y eso anda por aquí.
We got 6 condos in this general area that are approved.
Exacto.
So let's go to Playa Lago Condo and start listing some properties.
Ujú.
I mean, think about it. You can call expired listings and say, hey, you can get top dollar for this property. I know you decided not to sell it, but you can get top dollar because this property, I have it approved with my lender. You can do something like
Mario,
that.
we
Yes.
have someone asking where they can find the website. Is this like a website they can go to?
No, this is a lender subscription with Fannie Mae, and we get this sent to us, and then we disseminate it. I have the whole country. It just doesn't make sense for you to give you the whole country. So no, it's not something you can get yourself.
Yeah, let them know, honey, that we're gonna send this out to everybody.
I do want to show you guys does anybody have any more questions? I'm not monitoring the chat. I think you are, Honey.
Yeah, no, that was the only question.
Okay, if anybody has any questions on the Excel sheet before I go to the FHA website and show you guys how to look for it on FHA's website. Okay, so I'm gonna stop sharing. And I am now going to share this website. So let's go over here, share screen. Let's go with this one right here. Okay, so this is my browser. I don't have the website memorized. So what I simply do is I just typed in FHA approved condo list. And it's this one right here, that HUD.gov condominiums-HUD. And I'll send you guys the link on this. Actually, pretty easy. Now, don't go crazy with filling out all these fields. The only thing you need is a zip code. So let's say, what was the zip code here again?
33175.
33175. Let's do a search. You don't got to fill out anything else, just a zip code. Or, just the name or the county. I think if you do something other than the zip code, you'll also need to do the county, but I always just do zip code. And you click send. And here are all the units. Now, while you may think, oh my God, that's a big list, none of these are approved. I can promise you, look at this column right here, expiration date. Expired 2011, 2011. This one doesn't even have an expiration date. That means it's not approved. 2011, 2011. And why 2011? That's really when the rules started changing. Oh, this one just expired. Look at this. International Towers was recently approved. And it's expired now. So this has a good chance of getting a single unit approval. The association opted not to renew it. Let's see.
Lo que dice NA es que no.
No se ha evaluado.
dice.
No, look, this was rejected, insufficient reserve funds. So this is what I mean by the other thing I look for is see, this is the type of review approval method, HRAP. Yes,
So if it was rejected, does the association have the ability to resubmit?
they do,
or-
but they
and
won't.
just-
They won't. So look at this one, New Paseos Castellanos, single unit approval, FHA concentration restricted to 10%. And look, this column right here, where is it? FHA concentration, you see this column right here? If it's at 0, forget it. If it's at 1%, it's a maybe. But this one right here is 2.24%. Here's what that means. There's 2.24% of the units were FHA approved at one time. So what does that mean to you? That means that this might have a shot at getting a single unit approval. This one is 10.32, 4.02. This one has a very strong insufficient reserve. Project has loans to pay for reserve items, budget for 2008. So this was evaluated in 2008, maybe for a single unit, and well, not for a single unit, for a full approval, and it was declined. But it has 4% concentration. The ones that have a good chance are these right here. Single unit and 5% concentration. I promise you that this one probably, ignore this rejected. This one has a very good chance of having a single unit approval. So Millennium Townhouse, although it says the word townhouse, it's really a condo. Another example, this one has a very strong case to be made for a single unit approval. Now, are there any issues? I don't know.
Mario, I had a question for you.
Mhm.
Is it possible if one of the agents is gonna put an offer on on a condo, that they send something to you or Jose or anyone they're working with on the team to make sure that they should go forward?
Yeah, the budget. The budget would be the one thing that
Okay.
can tell it, can quickly eliminate or still keep you in the running on whether you can do an FHA condo or not. Because if you don't have the 10% reserves, forget it. You're not going to be able to do any type of financing in there other than limited review with 25% down.
Make it or break it.
Right, that the budget really makes it or breaks it. For FHA, period, if you don't have the 10% reserves, there's no plan B. You can't do it at all. But I
Thank
would
you,
say
Mario.
Millennium Townhouse, this next one, New Paseos Castellanos. And the combination you're looking for is the word single unit here and concentration. Ignore this rejected, don't worry about that. But if it says single unit and you have some type of level of concentration, you more than likely are going to get a single unit approval. Here's another one. This one has 2% concentration. It does have the word single unit. You might be able to get it here too. So that's how you use this website. If you click back, you can put another zip code. Let's do 33155 because I know the Bird Road because I worked there for 10 years. And I'm looking to see if there's any. None are approved. Let's try 33026. For some reason, that's in Pembroke Pines. I think that I saw one here the other day. No. Let's try one more. No. You know where we did a single unit approval? In Hialeah, Mango Hill. I know you guys heard of the infamous Mango Hill. We actually did a single unit appraisal. So this one says single unit approval.
Mario, when did
Yeah.
you do Mango Hill?
3 years ago.
I swear to God. In the 80s, I was selling Mango Hill. In the 80s, imagínate.
Oh yeah,
Jesus,
Mango Hill was the place to be. If you were keeping up
Mango
with the
Hill
Joneses, you
was
gotta
the
own in
place to
Mango
be.
Hill.
Todo el mundo quería comprar en Mango Hill. Mango Hill, my God.
Now-
All
now
right,
you
Mario,
gotta be-
sorry, man.
now you gotta
You
be
took me
strapped to
back.
get
You
in
took me
there.
back.
So this example, Westview number 4, has single unit approval and it has a 3.84% concentration. I promise you, you can probably get a single unit approval there. Unless they've drastically changed their association, you more than likely can get a single unit approval here. So now you're armed with a little bit of information for both conventional and FHA to give you the best chance you have, or give you the competitive edge against your peers, other agents, when it comes to condo, right? You now know the pitfalls as much as possible. You now have your hands on the condo list, and you now know how to evaluate FHA, whether you can do an FHA loan or there or not, or the strong possibility of whether you can do an FHA loan there or not. I'm going to pause there for any questions. All right. So I do have another topic to cover, although we don't have a lot of time, but I'm going to try to cover it as best I can. And that topic, it has to do with down payment assistance in Miami only. I'm going to just cover it, just the, how do we say, the main points on it, just to let you guys know the possibility of it. So let me come over here and share that screen. I can't see this. Oh, there it is. Share screen.
I have one question before you proceed. If
Sure.
that's- I'm looking at your spreadsheet that you had before. You had the Millennium Condom as approved on your spreadsheet, but on the FHA website, it's not approved.
Mhm.
Should we even go to the FHA website, or we should use your list?
I love that question. Thank you for asking it. And the answer is the list that I showed you was conventional and it's up to date for the most part. The FHA list is not up to date. You cannot really go by it. The only time you would use that FHA list is if you had a buyer and they have to go FHA, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. That's when you would use that FHA website and you would look for the word single unit and concentration. If both those exist, then you have a good chance of getting a single unit approval. But if your buyer is a conventional buyer, you wouldn't go by that FHA list at all. You would go by the spreadsheet that I'm going to send you guys.
Your spreadsheet is conventional.
Yes.
Thanks.
There is no spreadsheet for FHA. Okay. So let's talk. Let's see, how do I get that to click over there? So annoying. Hold on a second. Computer freeze. There you go. Okay, so let me come over to this screen here so I can. Perfect. Okay. All right. So we're going to go over 3 programs, and we're going to go over them fairly quickly, but I'll stop for questions. The reason I picked these 3 programs is these programs we've had a modicum of success with. There's a lot of down payment assistance programs that are available that I don't promote because they're difficult, they take too long, and typically the listing agent doesn't want to wait, doesn't want to give a 60-day contract. So some of these fall into that category, but let's talk about them anyway because we have successfully closed a bunch of these. The first one is by an organization called Miami-Dade Economic Advocacy Trust. As a matter of fact, they came out on Channel 7 News a few days ago. I was shocked to see it there. And basically, it provides up to $28,500 in a forgivable 10-year loan. It does require a 45-day contract, and it does require the seller to sign an addendum. So that's a little tough, but it's a doable loan. The second one is City of Miami. The folio ID has to start with 01, but it's very generous. It says 95,000, but they actually can do more if you have a very low income borrower with a lot of dependents. And then the third one is City of Miami Beach. We've closed, I think we closed one last month, and we closed about 5 of those last year. And they have a lot of money. And the reason they have a lot of money is because it's very difficult to buy in Miami Beach at a low price. That's why they give such large sums of assistance. All right, so the first one, MD. So you must reside in Miami-Dade County at the time of application. Actually, they removed that requirement, I think, last month. So you no longer have to live in Miami. You have to be a first-time home buyer. First-time home buyer is somebody that has not owned a home in the last 3 years. You have to complete an in-person home buyer education course from an approved home HUD counseling agency, which we will give you the list. And your household, there's household income limits. We'll talk about that in a second. The buyer has to contribute 1% of the sales price or 3% of the sales price, and we'll go over when you have to do that. And you have to do it through someone that's approved with the program. Loan Depot's approved with the program. The title company also should be approved with the program. So I'm not sure if Coronado Title is approved with it, but that's something we could look into. It closes in 45 days or less. And a seller addendum is required, and you cannot refinance within the first 10 years unless you pay off the assistance.
Perdóname.
In 10 años. It's forgivable in 10 years. So basically, here are the income requirements. So what I want to show you guys is that there's a delineation at the very top row says 1% borrower contribution, and then to the right it says 3% borrower contribution. So that line is a delineator, right? So if you make less than 100% of the area median income adjusted for family, then you only have to do 1%, right? And let me tell you what that means. So if you're a family of 3, so you go to the left column and you look at 3, and then you compare your income. So in order for you to just do 1% contribution, you can make up to $92,900. You guys follow along with that? So right here, right? A family of 3. So if you're a family of 8, you can make up to $136,000 and still only have to do 1% contribution. Now, the amount of money that you get will also, this chart tells you. If you notice below this on the second row, you have 28,500 and you have 14,500. So this is the delineator right here. So you cannot make more than 80% of the area median income adjusted for family to get the full 28,500. So if you have a family of 4, you can make up to 82,550 and you can get $28,500. It's a second mortgage forgivable in 10 years. No sales price limit. The problem with this program is it's 45 full days. And secondly, the seller has to sign an addendum. So, and the addendum says if the borrower doesn't qualify, they don't lose their money. So think about how hard that is, right? Nowadays. But nevertheless, we do a bunch of these, believe it or not. All right. The next one, well, I'll stop there. Does anybody have any questions about this program? We pair this up with any type of loan. Okay. So the second program is City of Miami. So this program, it says 95,000, you could actually receive more. It's actually based on income and bedroom count. The higher the bedroom count, the more money you get. We have two people that specialize in this program, Damaris Martin and Brigida Bellini. They've closed these, and we closed one this month, as a matter of fact. You have to be a first-time home buyer. The folio ID has to start with 01. I don't know about that area, but my understanding is that it's a area that's being regentrified. 01 in Miami is very Latin, I think. I don't know if anybody has an experience in that area, if they can chime in on that. Eddie, I don't know if you know that area.
I'm sorry, the 01 area, you mean? Or which area
Yeah.
are we talking about?
Yeah, the
mean,
folio
it's-
ID 01 for Miami.
Yeah, that's the entire city of Miami. I mean, that's when the folio 30 is Miami-Dade County and 01 is city of Miami. So anything that lies within the city of Miami is going to be labeled 01. So within the city of Miami, there are so many different, demographics and different housing pricing.
Okay.
So it's really hard. 03 is Coral Gable, 05 is Doral. So, whenever the folio starts with, it really tells you the city it's in.
Mhm.
So I think,
So
all
does
these
01
programs-
have good areas?
yeah, man. Yeah, real good areas. Yeah, you've got Little Havana, you've got,
Okay.
Charandoa. I mean, these are all areas, where you're gonna be looking at houses like Little Gables, which is buffering right next to Coral Gables, is within the city of Miami. And they call it Little Gables, and the houses are real beautiful. Yeah, they're older homes, but they're very beautiful. So,
Okay.
and right
Right,
off
so-
Brickell too, there's a beautiful area of houses. So
You see, I didn't know that. I thought that these were not great areas.
no. They've got some really good areas. Really good areas.
Okay. So just like the other program, you have to complete an an in-person homebuyer education course. You cannot do the online class. We're going to talk about the household income limits. The bar has to contribute only $500. No big deal. It has to be an approved lender. We're approved. The title company should have experience with down payment assistance, but doesn't necessarily have to be approved. So Coronado Title can do this one. This does have a max sales price of $352,000. No bankruptcy in the last 24 months. The housing ratios are 38%. So your payment on the house cannot exceed 38% of your income. There's a little flexibility there. And then your max debt to income ratio is 43%. That means your housing payment, your car payment, your credit cards and student loans and all that cannot be more than 43% of your income. And there is a little flexibility in that as well. This one has something called shared equity. Here's what that means. That means that the city of Miami is going to profit when you sell this property on their prorated amount. So if they gave you $100,000 and you bought the property for $352,000, their percentage is what they're going to be entitled to. So it's looked at more like a partnership with the borrower than it is a down payment assistance, but it is down payment assistance. It does have to pass an inspection. These take 60 days. And you can do a refinance, but you can't do a cash out during the term of this loan. So it's not forgivable. They just simply want their profit within 20 years. If you hold the loan for more than 20 years, they don't participate in the profits. Here are the income limits. So there's two programs. One lets you go up to 80%, adjusted for family size. If you notice, so for example, for a family of 5, one program will let you earn up to 89,000, but there's one program that lets you earn up to 156,000. So it just depends, but they have two very strong programs, and we'll do that evaluation for you if you have a borrower that. So the way I would look at this, if you have a borrower that's buying in Miami, and they're a first-time home buyer, you should ask, hey, what programs are available? And we'll kind of guide you. Now, don't shoot yourself in the foot. If the borrower has their own down payment, I would not bring this up. You're just making the transaction harder for yourself. We'd love to offer down payment assistance to everyone, but the reality is sellers don't want to wait 60 days. Sellers don't want to wait 45 days. And if your buyer didn't ask for it and has the money, I would steer away from it. But if you have a buyer that their only obstacle is the down payment, that is the ideal buyer for these programs. Here's the shared equity. Year 1 to 3, the agency receives 100% of the gains realized. Year 3 and up, the agency receives 85%. And years 3 through 20, the agency receives 5% or less. And after 20 years, the borrower receives 100%. And then after looks like it's 30 years is completely forgiven. And this is how they kind of give the money, although this is just one program. If you're buying a 3-bedroom, they'll give you 86,000. If you're buying a 4-bedroom, 95,000, et cetera, et cetera. But there is another program that now gives even more money. So do you need to know the exact details of this? No. You need, as they say, you need to know enough to be dangerous, right? You need to know that if you have let's say you have a single mom that makes $60,000 a year, she's got 2 kids, she's a perfect candidate for this. She's going to get the $28,000 from MD, the first program. Maybe we put her in Hometown Hero and we give her this $95,000. So she can buy a $352,000 property when without it, she can only buy a $150,000 property. So that would be an example of your good deed for your professional career of putting somebody like that in a home like this.
Hey, Mario.
Yeah.
So just to make sure that everyone understands, year 1 through 3, if the property is sold and there's an equity of, whatever, $10,000, it goes to the agency, correct?
100%.
Okay. So this is a program you really got to understand to sell it, or let them sell it, because
I was going to say, yeah.
Yeah.
So when they go to the counseling agency, they're going to explain the program in addition to us explaining the program. So there's no such thing as somebody that buys into this program that says to you 2 years later, hey, you didn't tell me that, because it would be complete BS. Several people would have told them how the program works. And these people, for the most part, I will tell you, are very appreciative and will, bend over backwards to meet all the requirements. And you're going to get a lot of referral business if you put someone in one of these programs. I can promise you that. And you go on social media and say, hey, I just closed a deal with a borrower, got $100,000 in assistance, City of Miami, private DM me and ask me how I did it. I can help you. You're going to get referral business from this. That's the name of the game. You should never treat a transaction as a transaction. You should treat a transaction as a relationship, because one buyer can generate a whole lot extra business from you. So you always got to think about it that way. Then we have the City of Miami Beach. I like this program, and the reason I like this program is that the people that administer this program are very nice, very accommodating, and they will help the buyer get as much money as possible. Very similar requirements. This one does require that the borrower live in Miami-Dade County. Has to be a first-time home buyer. The property has to be listed in Miami Beach. They have to do an in-person homebuyer education course. This one lets you go up to 120% of the area median income adjusted for family size. We're getting used to that, right? We'll go over that in a second. The borrower does have to contribute 2% of their funds. That's a little bit hard sometimes. Has to be an approved lender. The title company should have experience with down payment assistance. And I will tell you that if a title company has not used this program, it's going to be, for lack of better words, a shit show. Allow us to recommend the title company on this particular program, because this City of Miami Beach has a lot of requirements from the title company. Minimum credit score is 650. It's a weird number. I got to check that. That doesn't seem right. Maximum sales price depends on the bedroom count. And then we have the housing ratios that are a little flexible. This one also has a shared equity. This one does take 60 days. And you can refinance as a rate and term, but you can't cash out. Here are the income limits. So you can get up to $150,000, as you can see. And so it depends on whether you qualify as moderate income, low and very low, and extremely low. So it's adjusted for family size, but I will tell you that we closed 3, 4, 5 of these last year. I just closed one last month, and I have another one in the pipeline. I'm very surprised about this program, how well it's been doing for us. So if you farm Miami Beach, this is a program for you to consider. Here are the sales price requirements. So if you're buying a 4-bedroom, you can go up to $610,000. If you're buying a 3-bedroom, up to $493,000, et cetera, et cetera. So the sales prices are pretty generous. And so year 1 through 5, the city, they'll get a percentage of the profit based on the percentage of the city's contribution. So they'll prorate it based on how much you gave in. So I think there's an example. The sales price of the premise was $100,000, and the city provided $50,000. The city they'll get 50% of the profit. So it's their prorated version of it. Year 6 to 10, it's 40%. Years 11 through 15 is 25%. And the principal completely is forgiven in 15 years. So if you hold on to the property for 15 years and you live in the property, you don't owe any of it. It's all yours. That's nice. Remember that the spirit of these programs, the spirit of the rule, if you will, is to help people get into their first home and to help people that really need that otherwise could not buy without this large assistance. So those people are not investors. We don't expect them they're going to make money on these properties in the short term, in the short run. We expect them to stay in the property for a long time, or not we, but the organizations that give the money to. And that ends the programs. So I'll leave it open for questions, and otherwise that pretty much ends our presentation.
Honey, do you have anybody that's asked any questions?
No, I don't have anybody that's asked any questions. You feel free to unmute yourself if you have a question for Mario.
I do have one. Can you combine, I think you hinted at it earlier in the presentation, but can you combine the city with the county?
Yeah, you can combine all of these programs. Yeah, you can. It's not that it's difficult. We do it regularly. But there are a lot of requirements to meet. But yes, we have combined a first mortgage with a City of Miami Beach and with MD. And so the bar ends up getting like $150,000, $160,000. We've done that before. So yes, you can. It'll be a fun ride though.
So
Okay,
Mario,
I don't see any other questions online at the moment.
all right. So the entire Loan Depot team will be available to answer any questions on these programs. And you can reach out to them and they'll be glad to get on the phone with you and go over all this with you. I want to thank Mario for this wonderful presentation. I found even I learned a couple things that I thought I knew, but I didn't. And so find it very interesting on the profit sharing, equity sharing, and all that seems to be a resolution for some home buyers.
Sure.
So there really is no reason not to sell a property. It's a matter of preparing yourself ahead of time and matching the buyer you have with what is there. Mario, Loan Depot, thank you all very much, Mario. Wonderful,
welcome.
wonderful presentation, man.
All
Okay.
right.